It started with a scream that never reached human ears, an energy pulse too precise to leave a trace, but brutal enough to stop 3 hearts at once. The galactic feed, usually a swarm of trade updates, diplomatic agreements, and cultural performances, froze mid-transmission. Then silence. The kind of silence that doesn't invite peace, but telegraphs danger. Somewhere on the far end of the Zenther quadrant, on the luminous marble of the Galactic Council spire, Earth's top diplomat collapsed in his chair with his eyes wide open and lifeless. The only human ever granted a permanent seat at the table was now dead. No warning. No trial, no explanation. And humanity watched. Every single second streamed back to Earth in real time. Billions saw it happen. Millions more replayed it, hoping they had imagined it. He was more than just a suit shaking alien hands. He had come to represent humanity among the stars. And now he was gone. The footage vanished from official channels within the hour, replaced by a bland statement, an unfortunate medical event. No investigation, no names, no punishment. Just a cold, sanitized response from the Galactic Council, the grand coalition of 14 advanced species that had ruled in so-called peace for over 1,000 standard years. But Earth didn't forget. We watched him die. And we knew it wasn't natural, before this moment. Before the kill shot that silenced diplomacy, Earth was the newest member of the Council barely a decade in. We were the loud ones. The passionate ones. The unpredictable species with a short history and a longer memory. At first they chuckled at us, primitive, emotional, too proud of our advancements. But they had underestimated how fast we learned, how hard we pushed forward, and how deeply we valued our own. We were undisciplined, yes. Ruthless even. But loyal. And unlike the other members of the Council, we had one thing strangers didn't understand, a refusal to back down when one of our own was taken. The diplomat, whose name is now engraved across every continent on Earth, had served not just as a liaison but as a symbol. He showed them that humanity could stand among giants without bowing, that we didn't need to forget who we were to be part of something bigger. Maybe that's what they hated most. Maybe that's why they targeted him. Or maybe it wasn't hate, it was fear, fear of what we might become. The first official response from Earth wasn't made by the president or the prime minister or any governing body. It came from a civilian. A transmission hijacked a council channel less than 12 hours after the murder. A young technician, barely in her 20s, bypassed the security of the interstellar mesh and spat pure fury into the stars. You killed one of ours. You opened the door. Now watch. It wasn't long before Earth's official response followed. Unyielding, absolute, just 3 words. Spoken in 27 languages at once, broadcast across every inhabited system. Asterisk, asterisk, we declare war. Asterisk, asterisk, not sanctions. Not diplomacy. Total war. The Council didn't believe it at first. Humanity was too new, too small. Our fleets were modern but limited. Our colonies were young. We'd never even fought a large-scale interstellar war. We didn't have the numbers or the firepower to take them all on. At least that's what they thought. They didn't understand that humans do strange things under pressure. Every setback becomes fuel. Every loss, a rallying cry. And this time, we weren't fighting for territory. We weren't fighting for resources. We were fighting for justice. For the simple principle that you cannot murder a human and expect the species to roll over. The first Earth fleet didn't move for a week. Not until all diplomatic channels were closed, not until every consulate and embassy had been evacuated. Then came the silence, not of surrender, but of strategy. That's when they should have worried. Our ships came through the Perseid Rift like ghosts, silent, cloaked, fast. The Council wasn't ready. They still lived under the illusion that power meant tradition, that rule was made permanent by ancient treaties and population sizes. What they forgot was that humans evolved every year. While they sat on 1,000-year-old treaties, we rewrote entire military doctrines in months. It wasn't long before the first Council stronghold went dark. No survivors. No transmissions? Just the Earth flag carved into the station hull, still smoldering. Retaliation came fast. Whole systems began to turn red on the galactic map. Dozens of species, once neutral or unbothered, joined the fight not necessarily because they supported the Council, but because they feared what humanity could become if left unchecked. And maybe they were right to be afraid, because vengeance had become a ceremony. We stopped pretending we were fighting battles. This was a search, a hunt. Not one for power or prestige, but for every shadow involved in that murder. We didn't want their territory, we wanted names and Earth. Earth had changed. Even voices that once called for calm, for peace, now echoed with steel resolve. Unity like we'd never seen. The old divisions, borders, politics, economy erased overnight. Everything fed into the war machine. The scientists built weapons faster than the generals could deploy them. Civilians joined the fight in droves. Millions of minds focused on one goal, to make sure the Council never forgot what they had done, one by one. Their members started to fracture, not all by force. Some resigned, some turned informants, others just vanished. What began as a war became a reckoning, but not everything was going according to plan, unconfirmed. Reports started to trickle in, strange readings from deep space. Black sites that weren't on any official Council registry. Rumors of something buried. Something old and not quite biological. Some said it wasn't the Council that ordered the execution, but something behind them. Or beneath them, the deeper we pushed into their space, the more resistance changed shape. It became colder, not desperate, but calculated. As if the Council wasn't trying to survive, but delay us. Like they were hiding something. Our commander started noticing patterns. The places we attacked first? They weren't strategic. They were sacrifices, distractions. And the last words of a captured alien. Moments before he bit through a suicide capsule. Echoed in Defense Command's ears like a warning from the void. You think you're avenging him? But you've opened a door. And what's coming, none of us are ready for it. But we'd already opened that door, hadn't we? And behind it, something was waiting, something not of the Council, something older, something that fears. Humans most of all. And now it knows we're coming. In the silence that followed the prisoner's last breath, the war took on a different shape. We still fought. We still bled. But behind every mission, behind every burning outpost and silenced command center, grew a question far louder than any laser barrage. What did he mean? What door? Briefings began to change tone. Top-level orders were more cautious, often delayed. Recon teams were sent ahead, deeper into uncharted sectors where Council maps got suspiciously vague. The deeper into enemy space we operated, the more strange behavior we observed. Council forces abandoning fully supplied strongholds without a fight. Entire colonies evacuated with no signs of struggle, but no messages left behind. Outposts with computers wiped clean, power still running, and meals still warm on the tables. It didn't feel like a retreat. It felt like they were trying to cover something up, or run from it. Earth Command noticed patterns. Certain sectors, especially near the galactic core, showed a sharp increase in gravitational anomalies and dark energy spikes. Old records from before the Council era showed that colonies had once existed in those places, long before our time, but had since vanished from history. Wiped, scrubbed. Not destroyed, erased. Meanwhile, our own war effort kept accelerating. Earth's shipyards had been pushed into overdrive, churning out destroyers and assault frigates every other week. Robotic manufacturing systems replaced half the workforce. Civilian tech production was rerouted to serve military needs, everything from quantum lenses to orbital AI clusters. The human fleet nearly tripled in size in a matter of months. We were burning through our resources, yes. But for every planet that fell, another world volunteered its minerals, its workers, its sons and daughters. Humanity wasn't slowing down. We were just getting started. Because the pain of watching one of our own get silenced on alien soil had branded itself deep into our species. It wasn't just a war of retaliation anymore. It had become a war of purpose. The diplomat, our fallen representative, hadn't just been a voice. He'd been a bridge. Before him, no one in the Council truly understood humans. He asked too many questions. He pushed too hard in meetings, and that made the others uneasy. They had seen us making connections, humans, learning how to communicate with species that hadn't spoken peacefully with anyone in centuries. Alliances were forming. Trust was being built, and then he was killed. We started to suspect that it wasn't just one order or one planet behind it. That maybe it had been orchestrated, carefully, quietly, too clean to be a rogue act. His assassination wasn't just brutal, it was surgical, done inside the Council's own spire, in a chamber where energy weapons were banned, where every breath was recorded. That doesn't happen by mistake. There was someone powerful enough to bypass security, override the interstellar feed, and kill the one human voice inside the council hall with perfect timing. Someone who wanted to provoke a war, but why? Dig teams operating out of captured territories began retrieving fragments of old council tech devices built before many of the current species had taken power. Black stone cores etched with inscriptions no one could translate, sometimes emitting low-frequency pulses that affected even human equipment. Neuroscientists began reporting strange cases of soldiers experiencing shared hallucinations, dreams of a sky not known, stars in the wrong places, and a voice whispering in a tongue not spoken by any known species. Still, the war raged on. We didn't stop to question everything. Not yet. Strike squads continued deep insertions into council space, using slipstream gates we had reverse-engineered. Humanity was pressing harder into their core systems, unsure if we were winning faster or just falling further in. Several of our best captains made reports of anomaly ships encountering empty space where planets should have been, black holes where none had been charted, council databases turned up corrupted beyond repair, biological data missing, and, in one case, a library world once bursting with over 1 million years of species records burned to ash with no signs of a battle, not bombed, purged. At first we thought it was desperation, the council erasing its own past to keep us from learning something. But a deeper fear spread through command. What if they weren't the ones doing it? Fleet Admiral Hirano, one of the oldest surviving members of Earth's Defense Council, started pushing a new theory quietly behind secure walls, that the Council might not be the top of the galactic hierarchy after all, that something older than them was pulling the strings, a manipulator of civilizations, a force hiding in the dark, watching species rise and fall like chapters in a book, never stepping into the light, and we, the humans, had just shouted at the void, like fools. Still, we didn't stop. If anything, our intensity grew. Planet by planet, we turned symbols of the old order into battlegrounds. Monuments were demolished to make way for kinetic launchers, generators repurposed to power atmosphere shields. It wasn't hatred driving us, not entirely. It was justice, yes, but also fear. Fear that if we backed down now, humanity might vanish not in battle, but in silence. Like so many others likely had before. In one recovered site, deep within a frozen citadel orbiting a dead star, our operatives uncovered a vault. Inside were bone fragments not fossilized, not turned to dust. Preserved. Humanoid in structure. Very humanoid. Too similar to be coincidence. DNA scans showed markers nearly identical to early human genomes. And then came the kicker ship logs from over 30 council cycles ago, referencing a race called Vornaktal, lost, expunged, a race the current council had no memory of, but inside the logs. One translation shivered every commander's core. They woke too soon. Wore flesh not theirs and challenged what sleeps. All were undone by their ambition. Even then, we didn't believe. Not really. We still saw ourselves as the vengeful species, scouring a corrupt council for answers. But piece by piece, map by map, humanity began to realize we weren't just fighting a political war, we were unraveling a cover-up stretched across millennia. And whatever the council had been hiding, it was no longer contained. Command logs from the outer patrol fleets began to show strange patterns. Blackouts from units nowhere near enemy lines. Briefings leaking distorted audio files, long, grinding howls that made technicians retch when played back. One recon ship sent to survey a quiet sector returned, but the crew walked off missing time. Weeks, in their own words. Their memories fragmented. They weren't injured. Not outwardly, but none of them could speak Earth languages anymore. Our scientists and translators spent days trying to decipher the tongue they now spoke, and still barely scratched the surface. Not a code, not alien, something older. Mathematical but alive. And all the crew would say again and again was, "We didn't want to look," but it looked back. Earth Command finally issued a new protocol. Operation Eclipse. Any ship showing signs of anomalous contact was to be quarantined. Deep space data backups were encrypted and siloed from the core AI systems. No messages returned from infected zones without human review. Fear was no longer about losing the war. It was about bringing something back with us. And through it all, he remained in our thoughts, the murdered diplomat. His picture still rested on control room consoles across Earth. His final speech, a call for reconciliation between species. A hope for peace before the cracks spread too far, replayed at shift changes like a religious chant. His death propelled a movement, but now it felt like his murder had been a key, not to war, but to something sealed, something the Council shouldn't have touched. And humanity, bold as ever, marched in after them. A final intercepted message reached Earth's lunar command last cycle. Piggybacked on a dying frequency, barely recovered. It showed grainy footage of an ancient hollow structure orbiting a collapsed sun. Inside, a Council expedition team panicked, clawing at the walls, screaming in tongues. Their last words translated softly, "We thought it was mute. We thought it was dead. But it's listening now. And it knows the humans are coming." There was a growing coldness in the upper layers of Earth Command. Not fear exactly, but something close. No one would admit it out loud. On paper, humanity was still winning. Fleet movements were all carefully logged, systems liberated or secured. Diplomatic ties with a handful of smaller species were holding strong, some even begging for protection. Council territory had shrunk by nearly 50%. Resources flowed in. Victory looked inevitable to anyone watching from a screen, but it didn't feel like victory. The farther our forces moved from Sol, the deeper the silence became. Not just the vacuum silence of space, but the absence of any life, even alien. There were no more surrender broadcasts. No last stands. Just empty cities, flickering lights, and strange symbols scrawled on bulkheads, sometimes in languages no longer spoken. Sometimes in languages no one remembered writing at all. Human reconnaissance teams were under strict orders now. If they found anything unusual, they didn't investigate. They marked the location, logged the time, and pulled out. No questions. No curiosity, but not everyone followed orders. Sub-Commander Alexander ran the forward scouting detachment assigned to Thetanine, a ring gas giant that had been home to a mid-tier Council observatory. According to the brief, it had been inactive for 60 years. But when Alexander arrived, it was still warm. Doors unlocked. Terminals still running. No people anywhere. Just one message left flashing on every single screen in every room. Asterisk, asterisk, it is not a war. It is a test. Asterisk, asterisk, they pulled out immediately. Followed protocol. But something came back with them. Not a virus, not anything digital. It was in the air. Or maybe in their minds. The whole team experienced the same dream every night for 3 days, an image of a dying star surrounded by stone spires, reaching toward it like bone fingers. They said they didn't see it exactly, they just understood it, as if knowledge were injected into memory. Then one of them, the team's medic, began writing during his watch. Pages and pages in a language he never learned. Characters that pulsed when scanned under ultraviolet light, like they were more than ink. Within 48 hours, he was in a coma. They sent the team home after that, isolated, but the message from that station, asterisk, it is not a war. It is a test. Asterisk had already spread across several secure channels. Too fast to contain. Pilots, soldiers, and even civilian contractors started quoting it like it was prophecy. It made people ask hard questions. What if Earth's war wasn't the beginning, but the middle of something much worse? Officially, Earth's leadership stayed steady. No deviation from initial goals. dismantle the Galactic Council, locate those responsible for the assassination, and establish a new system of governance. But behind those orders, strategies shifted. Missions became calculated, almost surgical. No more posturing. No more dramatic speeches. Just data, silence, and control. And rumors. Too many rumors. The most whispered one? That Earth already knew who was responsible for killing the diplomat. That the Council didn't act alone. That it was them, the ones behind all this. The ones who erased other species. Who watched civilizations grow, then cut them down before they reached something. Forbiddance, ancient protocol logs recovered from Council archives reference this force only vaguely. Words like the listeners that hunger or the builders that reabsorb, not worshipped, not even studied. Just avoided. Like a child avoids the deepest part of the forest. What made the stories worse were the disappearances. Human commanders, researchers, entire squads. Gone without trace. No debris, no coms. Just black boxes recovered with static-filled audio and, occasionally, the phrase, "They know we're awake." One squad. Deep in the remains of a derelict world called Antara's Dream. Encountered a structure that didn't match any known design in Council or human history. A tower of shifting metal, humming faintly. One soldier approached it. Touched it and stopped moving. His eyes remained open. He blinked. He breathed. But the man was gone. No response. Every test showed consciousness, but nothing behind the eyes. They left him there, under lock and seal, still breathing hours later on board the shuttle. Staring at a corner no one else could see, and it wasn't just soldiers being affected anymore back on Earth. Civilian populations began reporting strange dreams in sectors closest to full-sensory war coverage. Psychologists flagged it first shared themes, consistent symbols, even among people with no military ties. Circles within circles. Stars bleeding inward. A memory of falling upward into the sky. Something was bleeding through. The war had become more than soldiers and ships. Something older maybe, something that had touched past civilizations and buried them. When they reached too close was watching Earth now. But if it was expecting us to turn back, to quiet down, to fall in line like others before us, it made a mistake, because humans don't back down. Not easily. A resistance developed inside the resistance. A circle of Earth's most experienced black ops teams and xenorchaeologists. Working off-grid, operating behind even the fleet's command structure. Codenamed Project Warden, their aim was simple: find what the Council had been hiding. Uncover the oldest layers of the galaxy. Track the signals. Learn what happened to the others, the lost species, the silenced rebels, the ones who vanished from the stars but never from the shadows, and they did find something. In the orbit of a dead binary system, outside Council maps entirely. They located a planet so old and red it shouldn't have supported any structure, let alone a city. But the ruins were there. Frozen metal streets half submerged in planetary crust. Glyphs carved so deep into stone they had likely withstood gravitational shifts from nova-level events, and in the center of that ruined city was a sphere, smooth, black, perfect, radiating no heat. But impossible to touch. Inside the ruins they found no bones. But impressions. Shadows in the walls. Millions of them, as if a civilization had lived inside and suddenly, instantly, had been erased, leaving behind only the memory of their presence. The team barely escaped. Their lead linguist carved 3 final words into the walls of their outpost before setting fire to it. ***, we are next. ***, that word was enough to begin a shift in tone back on Earth. Paranoia crept in. Defensive project construction increased. New technologies rose from research labs faster than light signal dampeners, emotion-based AI filters, thought-jamming fields, tools to hide, to shield, to last, but maybe it was already too late. At the edge of our solar system, sensors went dark for 12 seconds. Just 12. But during that moment, a transmission passed through quantum-sensed relays outside Neptune's orbit, too advanced, too dense for human origin. Every attempt to trace it failed. Every effort to unpack it resulted in scrambled feedback. Until days later, a word appeared in the code dump. Just one, asterisk asterisk aloud. Asterisk asterisk, no one knows what it means. Not yet, but it's growing harder to tell whether this war started because we struck back or because someone wanted us to. The more we uncover, the more it feels like retaliation was part of their design. Like killing the diplomat wasn't a mistake, but an initiation. A trigger. Humans have always believed we're different, that we're special. Maybe the galaxy wants to test that theory, and maybe, just maybe, the test has only begun. Even from orbit, the surface of the planet didn't look right. No clouds, no jet streams, no signs of wind, life, or water. Just a flat, smooth crust the color of dried blood, stretching across the entire visible hemisphere. Surveillance drones couldn't penetrate more than a few meters into the atmosphere. Sensors glitched. Cameras warped. One scout's visual feed briefly showed a city impossibly massive, stretching to the horizon only to blink back into nothingness a second later. Was it real? A projection? A memory? No one had answers, but Earth Command had already declared it a priority target, humanity called it. Terminus. It was the deepest point we'd ever reached into ex-Council space. The furthest edge, maybe even beyond. The Council didn't mention it in any archives. No star systems were charted within 1,000 light-years of its location. It had no known purpose, yet dozens of cross-checked signals traced activity back to this spot. Communications no Council member had confessed to sending. Signals rich with ancient code and mathematical structures that didn't belong to any known species. A joint force was assembled, handpicked from Earth's most hardened regiments and scientific teams. Veterans from every strike front, analysts from Project Warden, linguists, naval engineers. Black Ops all gathered on the mothership Aegis Reborn for one mission: land at Terminus, secure a perimeter, and locate the source of the galactic transmission known only as Aloud. No one knew what they'd find, but they all sensed it. This was it. The heart of something. Not just the war, the purpose behind it. The force behind the Council's silence. The storm we had been crawling toward ever since one of our own died in that Council chamber with no explanation. No justice. As the fleet approached orbit, the transmissions began again, faint, not audible as speech, but pulsing at intervals that some described as too deliberate to be random and too wrong to be sane. The signal knocked out shipboard AI systems on 6 vessels. Comms had to be rerouted through analog backups. Fleet Command pushed forward regardless. Project Warden's lead scientist, a woman who had decoded multiple languages of vanished civilizations, studied the signal in isolation. For hours she didn't speak. Then she wrote a single sentence in her journal before locking herself in her quarters. Asterisk asterisk, it knows what we fear. Asterisk asterisk, when they forced open the door. She was still alive, eyes open, heart beating but unresponsive. The same condition encountered before. Another one gone. The landing was a gamble. Atmospheric readings twisted with every pass, registering differently from each angle, as if the planet itself didn't occupy one fixed set of laws. After multiple failed attempts, they found a narrow band where descent didn't kill machinery. 7 dropships went in. Only 5 came out functional. The rest reported distortions, structural warping mid-flight, and brief vertigo-inducing flashes of wrong terrain, not the planet's surface, but something underneath. Something vast. The Boots on-ground teams found no life forms, no movement. But scattered across the crust were colossal monoliths, each one carved from a dark obsidian-like material that didn't scratch, didn't chip, and didn't seem to obey local light angles. They absorbed vision like voids. Standing structures, pulsing with buried currents. No doors, no windows. Not buildings. Not memorials. The best guess? Markers. Each monolith bore a different symbol. Not alien language, not quite. More like patterns that felt like ideas before the mind could translate them. Shapes your eyes didn't want to follow for too long. One soldier vomited blood after touching one. Another dropped dead without a wound. None of it made any sense. But the deeper the team moved toward the planet's equator, the more monoliths they encountered. And the more they started noticing something else. They weren't alone. Visual sensors picked up shadows that didn't move with any natural light source. Shapes too long, edges too sharp. Things that didn't show on thermal, radar, or radiation readings, but sat still at the edge of every corner. Just watching, no movement. But always there, one drone briefly caught something in motion. A flicker 20 meters tall, slender as if stretched by gravity, and draped in a silver light that bent the rules of vision. It wasn't looking at the drone. It was looking up toward space. Toward the human fleet. Fleet Command ordered all teams to halt forward advancement. But by then, it was too late. A massive tremor shook the surface. Not a natural Quaker rhythm. A pulse, traveling through the crust. Something beneath had activated. Not suddenly, slowly, like it had been listening for a long time. And had finally decided to respond. The signal changed frequency instead of math. Now it transmitted voices, hundreds layered over each other, speaking different tongues, some ancient human dialects long extinct, others only partially translated. But woven through them all was a central phrase, repeated again and again across every data feed. Asterisk, asterisk, you stepped outside your cycle. Asterisk, asterisk, all at once. Everything started to unravel. Back in orbit, Aegis Reborn went dark. Its main reactor still burned, but no further communication was received. Interceptor ships that flew too close to the planet began rapid aging metal fatigue visible in real time. Organic matter turned brittle like dried leaves. Weapons decayed down to rusted cores. A whole wing of fighters dissolved mid-flight. As if they were erased from reality, Command scrambled to retreat. But protocols weren't made for this. No known science explained what was happening. Time acted wrong. Gravity fluctuated in short waves like ocean tides. The monoliths echoed a low vibration that human skulls picked up before sensors did. Crew began reporting auditory hallucinations again, this time with specific phrases. The council lied. Memory cannot be buried. This was never your galaxy. And worst of all, asterisk, asterisk, you were invited. Asterisk, asterisk, panicked attempts were made to use slipstream gates. Half of them collapsed mid-spin. One opened, but the carrier ship that passed through came out split, two halves cleanly severed, floating apart in slow motion with no signs of damage. Just impossibility. Earth Command ordered immediate disengagement. Every surviving ship to pull back, breach quarantine protocol, and travel home by any method necessary. But ground teams couldn't leave. Not all of them. Long-range comms were jammed through something in the soil. Signals bent back toward the surface. Then the surface itself began to change. The planet wasn't a crust. It was a shell, and it was opening, not cracking, not collapsing, unfolding, like a structure meant to be hidden until the right moment. Beneath it was not magma, not bedrock, but an engineered core. Synthetic and ancient. Optical storms shot upward from the core's edges, forming a ring of shimmering black haze that wrapped around the horizon. Monoliths elevated from the ground like rising towers. Shapes started to take form beneath the surface, a geometric labyrinth of city-like structures, stretching thousands of kilometers in every direction. A city not meant to be seen, but found, and inside. Something stirred. Humanity had triggered it. No one knew what it was. But every system's instruments finally all agreed on one thing. Whatever was waking had mass beyond planetary scale. Gravity readings confirmed it. It wasn't a weapon or outpost. It was something born before biology, before words. Something that had sat beneath the galactic friction for eons, waiting for a species loud enough, angry enough, bold enough to dare enter. And we had the last recorded feed from Terminus Base showed a sky darker than night. Clouds forming in unnatural spiral loops, and something immense casting a shadow across the monolith fields, its edges too fast to track. Its scale too large to fit in frame. One soldier stared upward and whispered, "Asterisk, we thought they feared us. They were just keeping us out?" Asterisk, and then the feed cut to black. All quiet. Terminus had opened. And humanity was inside. In the hours that followed the blackout at Terminus, Earth Command waited in silence, orbiting the edge of a planet that shouldn't exist, watching a sky that bent too sharply around a presence no cameras could fully capture. The human fleet, damaged and scattered, was barely holding formation. Comms were down except for local relays. The mood aboard every ship was the same quiet, tense, and raw with the kind of dread that made even the most hardened veterans avoid eye contact. Then, at 0300 Standard Earth Time, something changed. A signal came through unfiltered, unjammed, delivered directly to the fleet in clean Earth binary. It wasn't corrupted this time. It didn't pulse or twist itself like the others had. Just simple data. A single message, broadcast on all fallback channels, patched into every hull speaker and holographic display at once. You were not the first, but you are the first to fight back. No name, no signoff, no context. But in that message was the beginning of the end not of humans, but of the war itself. The planet below, the one we called Terminus, stopped changing. Its surface held still, the monoliths dimmed, and whatever had risen in the haze above it began to retreat, not disappear. Not flee, just move, folding back into the deep core like a machine going back to standby. It was over. Or, more honestly, paused. The surviving mission crews on the ground, assumed wiped out, re-established contact. Not only alive, but changed. Scans showed they were unharmed, yet their DNA bore subtle, undetectable shifts. Not mutations, more like calibration. They came back with memories no one could verify. Visions of impossible cities, extinct species, and crumbling archives layered under stars that don't exist anymore, and they remembered something else. Truth. The Council hadn't murdered the human diplomat on their own. It had been agreed upon. Not in public. Not in back rooms, but decided by fear. The diplomat had uncovered references to Terminus shortly before his death. He had connected the dots vanished species, redacted records, inconsistencies in ancient history. He had brought it to the Council, naively believing they wanted answers. They did not. They wanted quiet. He represented noise. So. He was removed. The order had been buried so deep that even among the Council, only a handful knew the reason. The others believed it had been a simple tactical act. A painful but necessary cut to keep their civilization from waking something best left sleeping, but by then, it was already too late. Humans had already pushed beyond the threshold. Curiosity, rage, grief, it had driven us too far, too fast. We'd uncovered what cloaked every corner of galactic politics. That the story told by the Council Alliance, peace, quiet progress, it was only one layer below. It was a galaxy shaped by intervention. Species had risen, spoken, reached for too much, and disappeared, allowed. That's what humanity had been labeled, not blessed, not chosen, simply permitted to go further, monitored, studied, maybe tested. The war hadn't been a test for victory. It was a test of nature. What would humans do when struck, when choked? We didn't cower. We screamed. We roared. We retaliated with everything we had and against all odds. We survived. Back on Earth, things began to shift quickly. The war officially ended, though no treaty was signed. There was no one left to negotiate with. The Council had collapsed from within, fractured by distrust, consumed by guilt, and crippled by the systems they had once relied on to stay in power. Their orbits went dark one by one. Some species withdrew into isolation. Others sent ships to Earth's space under white flags, offering apologies and alliance. Not because they had to. Not because we demanded submission, because we had become something they feared and respected. The revenge-driven path had changed. The fleets that once stormed Council worlds were now exploring them, salvaging records, rebuilding infrastructure. We didn't conquer their planets. We helped stabilize them, not because we had forgotten, but because we had something they didn't. Memory. We remembered what power misused looked like. We had seen the edge of an ancient intelligence capable of ending entire civilizations with a thought. And we understood, finally, Why the council spent so much time trying to contain knowledge rather than share it. They weren't guarding over civilization. They were holding back the darkness. As Earth rebuilt its military into something quieter, more agile, its focus shifted. Humanity's greatest minds now bonded across national and disciplinary lines like never before. Launched Project Threshold, a long-term initiative to understand the nature of Terminus, its architects, and the purpose behind the test. Thousands volunteered for deep study. A new type of science bloomed, one that mixed mathematics, archaeology, linguistics, psychology, and cosmology. Explore, don't conquer. Understand, don't awaken. Still, the threat remained. Terminus wasn't destroyed. It couldn't be. The structures, the monoliths, the signals, they remained. Quiet, mostly, but not silent. Occasionally, faint signals would pulse again. Not messages. Not warnings, reminders, and when they came, Earth listened, documented, then sat back and waited. No one wanted to be remembered as the species that tried to poke the sleeping giant. Twice, across Earth, memorials were built not just for the soldiers we lost in the war, but for the diplomat who started it all. Some called him a martyr, some a victim, others the spark. His work survived, scattered through speech logs, unfinished transcripts, and recovered recordings. Every school in every major city carried his final message in their curriculum. Asterisk, asterisk, truth is not something you hold. It's something you reach for even if it costs you everything. Asterisk, asterisk, in the end, humanity had changed. We came into the galaxy small, noisy, angry. Some thought we'd tone down after the war, that we'd fold into the galactic status quo and take our place. Like everyone else, we didn't. We became something else entirely. Curious, measured, dangerous. We didn't threaten. We didn't warn. We didn't puff our chests like the species of old. We simply remembered and waited. Because now we knew that what lay beneath the galaxy, the hidden layers. The Watchers, the architects, they hadn't revealed everything. They never do. That's not how they work. And if one day they reached out again, if they issued another test, we'd be ready, not because we had better weapons, but because we understood. The price of ignorance, the council tried to silence a man and stop a question. Instead, they woke a species. And now, the galaxy remembers what happens when you kill a human. Diplomat, you don't get silence, you get total war, and through that fire, you birth something entirely new, something they never expected. Humanity, watching now and ready.